Section 1. The morning the unthinkable began. April 18th, 1942, North Pacific Ocean, 650 miles off the coast of Japan. Wind hammers across the flight deck of the USS Hornet as freezing seawater crashes over the bow. The sky is a dull sheet of gray, the smell of gasoline clinging to the air. 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers sit lashed to the deck, their wings slick with spray, their engines silent, for now. Lieutenant Colonel James Harold Doolittle, goggles hanging around his neck, strides across the pitching steel deck, boots slipping slightly as the carrier lists into another heavy swell. His jaw is set, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. He has flown in every condition imaginable, but he has never taken off a land-based bomber from the deck of a ship. No one has. Behind him, the first pilot in line, Lieutenant Ted Lawson, tightens the strap on his leather flight helmet, eyes fixed on the impossibly short runway ahead, less than 500 feet before the bow drops into the sea. Each time the Hornet's nose dips into a swell, Lawson can see nothing but gray water and foaming waves. "Sir, are we really going off that?" one crewman mutters. Doolittle doesn't look back. "We weren't asked if it was possible," he says quietly. "We were told it was necessary." Far to the west, across an ocean of cold, iron-colored water, the Empire of Japan lies silent, unaware that, in a matter of hours, American bombs will fall on Tokyo for the first time in its history. Unaware that 16 twin-engine bombers, aircraft the Japanese believed could never reach their homeland, are about to shatter the illusion of invulnerability built since Pearl Harbor. A klaxon erupts across the flight deck, 3 sharp blasts. A lookout's voice cracks over the intercom. "Enemy picket ship spotted off the starboard bow, range 10 miles. The words hit every man like ice water. They have been discovered, hours earlier than planned. Captain Mark Mitcher, commander of the Hornet, rushes toward Doolittle, coat whipping in the ocean wind. "We have to launch now, Jim," Mitcher says over the roar of the sea. "If we get closer, every cruiser in the Japanese Navy will be on top of us before you're airborne." Doolittle nods once. He knew this moment might come. What he hadn't predicted is how far they still were from Japan, hundreds of miles farther than briefed. Fuel calculations had been tight even at the planned distance. Now, chances of reaching the recovery airfields in China have dropped to almost 0. But turning back is impossible. Failure? Unthinkable. Doolittle turns to his men. "We launch immediately," he calls out. "No delays." The crews climb into their B-25s, engines coughing to life, propellers whipping mist into white spirals. The deck trembles beneath them as the carrier begins turning into the wind. Lieutenant Lawson feels his bomber shake violently as gusts slam against the fuselage. His co-pilot, Dean Davenport, leans in close. "We're really doing this," Davenport says, voice barely audible. Lawson forces a grin he doesn't feel. "Yeah, we're making history. Or headlines." The first bomber in line inches forward. Sailors remove wheel chocks. Tie-down straps are ripped free. Every man in sight gives a final thumbs up. Doolittle climbs into his own aircraft, plane number 1. He pulls the canopy closed, sealing himself into the cold, oil-scented cockpit. His heart is steady. This moment is the culmination of months of planning, secret training, sleepless nights, and untested theory. The signal officer stands at the bow, paddles raised. A single green flash. Doolittle pushes the throttles forward. The engines scream. The bomber lunges down the deck. Salt spray blinds the windshield. The ship dips into a swell. The runway tilts downward. For 3 eternal seconds, the B-25 skims just feet above the waves, wheels almost touching the sea. Then the aircraft rises. Shouts erupt across the deck. The impossible has begun. One after another, 15 more bombers follow, each takeoff a defiance of physics, fear, and the expectation of the Japanese high command. The sky fills with the dark silhouettes of American bombers heading west, slipping into the clouds. Far ahead lies Tokyo, unaware, unprotected, and about to learn that the United States of America is not beaten, not broken, and not afraid. This is the raid that will shake the empire, rattle the war cabinet of Japan, and signal the beginning of a new phase of the Pacific War, one in which the initiative, for the first time, shifts away from Tokyo. Above the roar of his engines, Doolittle looks toward the distant horizon. "Let's show them," he mutters, "what America can do." Section 2. The bombers over Tokyo, and the moment Japan realized the war had changed forever. April 18th, 1942. Midday. Approaching the coast of Honshu, Japan. Clouds drift like torn silk across the sky as Doolittle's formation pushes westward, engines humming in steady unison. The ocean below slowly gives way to faint outlines of fishing boats, then jagged silhouettes of the Japanese coastline. The pilots exchange tense glances. This is the moment every man has replayed in his mind for weeks. Japan lies ahead. Tokyo, the heart of the empire, only minutes away. In Doolittle's cockpit, the radio crackles with static. Lawson's voice comes through, strained but steady. "Leader, this is 3. Coastline in sight." Doolittle's reply is crisp, low, controlled. "Proceed as briefed. Maintain altitude. Stay fast and low." The bombers descend to rooftop height, their shadows racing across farmland, scattering livestock and startling farmers who look upward in pure disbelief. No Japanese civilian has ever seen an American bomber above their home. The idea itself had been considered impossible. American planes were supposed to be trapped thousands of miles away. But now, 16 B-25s cut across the Japanese mainland at tree-top level, engines roaring like thunder. On the ground, an air raid siren begins to wail, a confused, late, strangled cry that spreads from city to city. People in the streets freeze. Soldiers shout orders. Anti-aircraft gunners scramble to their posts, stunned to see American markings streaking across the sky. Inside Tokyo's military district, young officers burst into the operations center, shouting over one another. "American bombers! Over Tokyo!" "That's impossible! Where are they coming from?" No one knows. No one can believe it. Japan's high command, the same one which boasted that the home islands were untouchable, is now watching American bombers appear as if they materialized from thin air. Doolittle's run over Tokyo. Doolittle's aircraft approaches Tokyo's industrial district. Smoke from factory chimneys curls into the air as workers stand frozen, staring upward. The city, proud, modern, glittering at the heart of the empire, is about to feel war in a way it never has before. Doolittle flips the arming switch. "Bomb doors open!" A metallic clank echoes through the fuselage as the doors unfold. Below, factories, military facilities, and supply depots slide into view. "Bombs away!" The B-25 jolts slightly as the payload drops. Not massive, not destructive enough to cripple Japan's industry, but powerful enough to shatter something far more important: the illusion of invincibility. Explosions ripple through the district. Smoke plumes rise. Civilians scatter. Fire crews rush into action, but confusion reigns across the entire city. For the first time in the 2,600-year history of the Japanese Empire, foreign aircraft have struck the capital. Lawson over Yokohama. A few miles south, Lieutenant Ted Lawson brings his bomber screaming over Yokohama's naval yards. Anti-aircraft guns finally roar to life, black bursts peppering the sky. Shrapnel rattles against the fuselage. "Hang on!" Lawson shouts to his crew as he banks hard left, skimming above warehouses and cranes so low that the bomber nearly clips a rooftop. Gunners on the ground fire wildly, not with discipline, not with coordinated defense, but in pure panic. No training, no planning, no doctrine had ever prepared Japan for this scenario. Lawson drops his bombs in a tight pass. Detonations rip across a factory roof, sending debris cascading down onto the dockyards. Workers flee in terror, some diving into the harbor. In his logbook later, Lawson will write, "The city looked stunned, like a man punched for the first time in his life." Japanese command realizes the truth. Inside the Imperial General Headquarters, officers crowd around a map of the home islands. Their voices tremble with a mixture of fury, fear, and disbelief. How did they get here? Where did they launch from? How many more will follow? Admiral Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, stands silent. He knows instantly what this means, not tactically, but psychologically. Japan, the nation that struck the first blow, now realizes that America can strike back anywhere, anytime. One officer stares at the map, voice cracking. If they can reach Tokyo, they can reach anything. That sentence hangs in the air like smoke. With a single raid, 16 planes, hardly enough firepower to damage a nation, the United States has accomplished what millions of tons of explosives could not. Japan is no longer fighting a crippled, hesitant enemy. It is fighting a giant that has just begun to wake up. The escape toward China. As bombs fall across Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, and Kobe, the American crews begin the long, desperate flight toward China, knowing full well they do not have enough fuel to make it. Rain clouds gather, night approaches. Japanese fighters scramble to intercept. What had started as a daring gamble is now turning into a fight for survival. But every man on those B-25s knows one thing as certain as the horizon ahead. They have changed the war. They have shown Japan that America will not surrender, will not hide behind oceans, and will not be intimidated. Not by surprise attacks, not by distance, and not by fear. And in the war rooms of Tokyo, that message lands harder than any bomb. Section 3. The Aftermath. Japan never expected, and the panic that flooded Tokyo's war rooms. April 18, 1942, late afternoon. Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, Kobe. The echoes of the explosions fade, replaced by the frantic clatter of fire engines, the shouting of police, and the stunned murmurs of civilians trying to understand what has happened. Thick smoke coils upward from burning warehouses, factories, and dockyards. Not catastrophic damage, but symbolically devastating. Tokyo, the heart of the empire, has been touched by war. In the streets, families gather in shock. Mothers clutch children. Elderly men stare silently at the smoke plumes, whispering prayers. Soldiers push through crowds, urging people into shelters, but most simply stand frozen, unable to believe the truth unfolding in front of them. American planes were here, above their homes, above the emperor's capital. No amount of propaganda can hide it. No censor can erase the sound of explosions or the sight of burned rooftops. The attack is real and unforgettable. Inside the Imperial General Headquarters, the panic begins. Deep beneath Tokyo's government district, the Imperial General Headquarters is in chaos. Telephones ring non-stop. Officers scramble across the map room. Radio operators shout updates as reports pour in from across the mainland. Bombers sighted over Kobe. One dropped 4 bombs. Nagoya stations hit. Unknown casualties. Yokosuka Naval Base engaged. Minor structural damage. A senior intelligence officer, pale and sweating, slams his fist on the table. How did they slip through our entire defense network? Another officer, younger, shaking, replies, There was no warning, no scout reports, nothing. They appeared out of nowhere. The room falls silent. Then, slowly, the most chilling truth begins to spread. If the Americans can reach Tokyo now, what will they do next year? Or the year after? Yamamoto's realization. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands apart from the chaos, arms folded, eyes locked on the map. He knows, perhaps better than anyone, what this moment means. Japan had hoped that America, wounded at Pearl Harbor, would negotiate, lose heart, fear a long war. But the Doolittle Raid proves the opposite. America is not wounded. America is enraged. America is awakening with a clarity and fury Japan has never imagined. A junior officer rushes to Yamamoto, voice trembling. Admiral, we believe the attack came from carriers, but we don't yet know how many. Yamamoto closes his eyes, exhaling slowly. The Americans are unpredictable, he says. They will not fight as we expected. He knows what must happen next. Japan must destroy the American carriers immediately, or the war will spiral beyond control. This realization becomes the seed of the next catastrophe, the Battle of Midway. The American crews fight for survival. Meanwhile, far from Tokyo, Doolittle and his men are battling worsening weather as they head toward the coast of China. Fuel gauges drop rapidly, engines sputter in the cold wind. The horizon is nothing but endless gray. Some crews pray. Some write quick notes to loved ones. Some grip their controls so tightly their knuckles turn white. They know they will not reach a friendly runway. Doolittle radios the formation. Prepare to ditch or bail out. Do not attempt to land in the dark. His voice is calm, steady, the voice of a commander who knows the price of every decision he has made. The crews press on into the storm. Every man understands the costs they are about to pay, and the impact they have already made. Japan's leadership faces the new reality. In Tokyo, the last shock of the day comes from an intelligence briefing delivered at dusk. Japanese analysts, working rapidly through intercepted radio transmissions, confirm a terrifying possibility. The bombers were launched from ships that approached Japan undetected. The officer presenting the report hesitates before speaking the final line. If the Americans can bring bombers within 600 miles of Tokyo, we cannot protect the homeland. This time, there is no shouting, no arguing, only silence. A silence so heavy, it feels like the first crack in an empire. Because today, April 18th, 1942, Japan realizes the war it thought it controlled is slipping out of its hands. The Americans have shown their reach, their determination, their boundless industrial strength. And this is only the beginning. Section 4. The Long Night over China. Survival, Sacrifice, and Japan's Most Dangerous Fear. April 18th, 1942, 10:15 p.m. Somewhere over the East China Sea. The wind howls against the thin aluminum skin of the B-25 Mitchell bombers as the formation breaks apart into the darkness. Fuel tanks sit nearly empty. Engines cough. Needles on the dials tremble dangerously close to zero. Below is nothing but black ocean. Above is nothing but storm. The bombers fly blind. Inside Jimmy Doolittle's cockpit, rain lashes the windshield. The instrument lights flicker. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Richard Cole, leans forward, wiping condensation off the glass with his sleeve. "We won't make land, sir," he mutters. Doolittle doesn't answer. He knows. They all know. But the mission was worth it. Crew after crew leaps into the void. One by one, the B-25s reach the end of their endurance. 11:25 p.m., plane number 3. The crew straps on parachutes. The pilot shouts, "Jump!" They tumble into 10,000 feet of open night. 12:40 a.m., plane number 6. Out of fuel, the bomber crashes into the surf off the Chinese coast. The canopy fills with water instantly. Airmen fight to escape the sinking wreckage. 1:15 a.m., plane number 11. The bomber clips a tree, skids through a rice field, and bursts into flames. Chinese farmers run toward the burning plane, not away, risking their lives to save the Americans. This becomes a repeating story through the night. Americans falling from the sky, Chinese civilians racing to help, Japanese patrols hunting both. Chinocrats pays the price, and the men know it. In the villages beneath them, lanterns glow as families search the fields for airmen. They offer water, blankets, rice, shelter. They know the risk. If the Japanese discover them helping, the entire village could be massacred. And still, they help. One crewman, bruised and bleeding from a hard landing, looks at the villagers tending his wounds and whispers, "Why would you risk everything for strangers?" The old man beside him smiles, sadly. "Because you bombed Tokyo," he replies. "And because you are human." But as dawn approaches, the cost will become devastating. The shock reaches Japan's high command again. April 19th, 1942, 8 a.m., Tokyo. A senior intelligence briefing delivers a second revelation, even more terrifying than the raid itself. The Americans survived and landed in China. The officers around the table go still. This means Japan's vast mainland territory is now exposed. American forces can strike from Chinese bases. The raid was not a symbolic attack. It was a strategic warning. Admiral Nagumo slams a fist onto the table. "If they can fly across our empire, the homeland is not safe." General Tojo, stern as stone, responds, "Then we shall burn China until no American can ever hide there again." What follows becomes one of the darkest retaliations in the war. Operation Sego, the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign. Tens of thousands of Chinese civilians will be killed, entire towns destroyed, all to punish the people who dared help the Doolittle Raiders. Yamamoto hears the plan and closes his eyes. He knows the truth. Japan is lashing out in fear. Doolittle awakes, believing his mission has failed. Meanwhile, Jimmy Doolittle regains consciousness in a Chinese farmhouse. His ribs ache. His face is bruised. His uniform soaked through. He looks at his rescuers, Chinese villagers offering tea, food, and clothing, and shakes his head. "I've lost all my aircraft," he whispers. "This mission was a failure." The villagers glance at each other, confused, because they have not seen the morning headlines. They have not heard the panic gripping Tokyo. They have not witnessed the Imperial Navy turning its entire strategy upside down overnight. But someone else has. A Chinese officer enters the room holding a translated newspaper. He places it in front of Doolittle. The headline reads, "American bombers strike Tokyo, capital in panic." Doolittle stares at it. For the first time since the mission began, he allows himself to breathe. "Then," he says quietly, "we did what we came to do." Japan makes its most dangerous miscalculation. That same morning, Japan holds yet another emergency meeting. Admirals, generals, ministers, all gathered around the enormous map of the Pacific. The conclusion is nearly unanimous. The American carriers must be destroyed immediately. Only one man hesitates, Yamamoto. He understands what no one else in the room fully sees. The Doolittle Raid was not America's greatest blow. It was a warning shot, a signal that the U.S. industrial machine was awakening, and Japan had no hope of matching it. But Japan does not choose caution. It chooses pride. And that pride leads them directly toward Midway, the battle where Japan will lose its carriers, its momentum, and its future. All because 16 American bombers reached Tokyo and shattered the illusion of Japanese invincibility. Section 5. The Strategic Earthquake. How 16 bombers forced Japan toward its greatest defeat. May 1942. The Imperial Navy chooses a path it cannot escape. In the weeks following the Doolittle Raid, the highest levels of Japanese command gather inside the Naval General Staff Building in Tokyo. The mood is not triumph. It is not even anger. It is fear. Maps are unrolled across long wooden tables. Red pins mark every airfield in China, every known American carrier, every possible approach toward the Japanese homeland. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands quietly at the head of the room. He watches the younger officers argue about retaliation, about honor, about destroying the Americans before they can strike again. One frustrated commander shouts, "If 16 American bombers can reach Tokyo, the next attack will be hundreds." Another slams his fist on the table. "We must lure the American carriers into one decisive battle, finish them forever." The path they choose is already written. Attack Midway. Force the American carriers into a trap. Destroy them before the U.S. grows too strong. But Yamamoto knows the truth. Because of the Doolittle Raid, Japan is no longer acting strategically. It is reacting emotionally. The worst mindset in war. Meanwhile, America awakens a giant. On the other side of the Pacific, the United States undergoes a transformation that shocks even its own commanders. Washington receives the first intelligence reports. Tokyo struck, infrastructure damaged, civilian panic widespread, morale impact enormous. Factories across America erupt into activity. Ford, Boeing, North American Aviation, thousands of workers pounding metal, welding steel, stitching fuselages. Assembly lines run 24 hours a day. Carriers under construction are rushed ahead of schedule. Recruitment offices overflow. Newspapers, once filled with grief after Pearl Harbor, now carry headlines dripping with defiance. "We can hit back. The first blow of many." Children collect scrap metal. Women enter factories in record numbers. Pilots train day and night over the American heartland. The Doolittle Raid becomes a spark, igniting the industrial inferno that Japan cannot match. Admiral Nimitz receives a flood of new resources: fuel, ships, pilots, aircraft, intelligence. He sees the shift immediately. The initiative, he says, has begun to turn. Japan hunts the raiders and walks into a trap. Desperate to erase the humiliation, Japan orders its navy, find the American carriers, destroy them, erase the shame of Tokyo. But Doolittle's force has long since disappeared. Instead of finding the raiders, Japan walks straight into a web of American codebreakers. Station Hypo in Hawaii, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, intercepts Japanese communications. Analysts huddle over radio intercepts. Slip after slip of Japanese code begins to crack. One operator points at a decoded message. "Admiral, they are preparing a major operation. Target AF." Rochefort smiles. AF is Midway. Nimitz receives the message. He leans back in his chair, eyes narrowing. We'll be there waiting for them. The Doolittle Raid did more than damage Tokyo. It forced Japan to reveal its next move. June 4th, 1942. Midway changes everything. The Battle of Midway begins before sunrise. American scouts spot the Japanese carrier force first. Dive bomber squadrons roar into the sky. Engines scream as they climb toward the sun. Below them, on the decks of the Japanese carriers, fuel lines snake across the floor. Aircraft are being rearmed. Bombs sit exposed in rows. The timing is perfect. Commander Wade McCluskey leads his dauntless dive bombers into a final turn. He looks down at an enemy fleet that believes itself invincible. He whispers, "This is for those Tokyo boys." At 10:22 a.m., in a span of just 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers erupt into towering pillars of flame. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu. Their decks become infernos. Their aircraft die before they can take off. The blow is so severe that one Japanese officer writes, "We could not defeat a nation that could strike Tokyo in April and destroy our carriers in June." The final realization: Japan had lost long before it admitted it. Months later, as the war drags on, Allied analysts interview prisoners, study diaries, and intercept radio transmissions. One message stands out, a note written by a Japanese staff officer. The day the Americans bombed Tokyo, the outcome of this war became inevitable. Not because of the damage, not because of the casualties, but because Japan understood. The Americans were just getting started. Their carriers had survived, their pilots were improving, their factories were awakening, their industrial machine was beyond imagination. 16 bombers changed the psychology of an empire. Doolittle himself receives the Medal of Honor, but it is a simple statement he makes years later that summarizes the raid better than any historian could. We didn't win the war that day, but Japan learned that they would lose it.